will do 5 precepts from page 5. Oh no. Page 3. Yes, from the beginning to the end of the page. Homage to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened One. Homage to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened One. Homage to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened One. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha. For the second time, I take refuge in the Buddha. For the second time, I take refuge in the Dhamma. For the second time, I take refuge in the Sangha. For the third time, I take refuge in the Buddha. For the third time, I take refuge in the Dhamma. For the third time, I take refuge in the Sangha. I undertake the precept to abstain from harming living beings. I undertake the precept to abstain from taking what is not given. I undertake the precept to abstain from sexual misconduct. I undertake the precept to abstain from false speech. I undertake the precept to abstain from intoxicating drinks and drugs that lead to heedlessness. Thank you. So before we begin, just a housekeeping thing. Whoever used the restroom left to this wall is lacking mindfulness, so is disqualified from using it until he improves in mindfulness. Because myself and Bhante Sankita use it, and I get caught if if something is not in order. He doesn't say anything, and that is even worse. So please be careful. Thank you. I saw some trash not thrown in the trash bin. There is a full trash bin there, and that is not nice. And some other thing that I don't recall. So today we are going to discuss the first sermon of the Buddha. I'm sure some of you are delighted in it, me as well. That is found in this big holy book, the Connected Discourses of the Buddha. The term Saṃyutta is translated here as connected, which also has the meaning of yoked together with truth and a connecting thread, because some of the sutra categories fall into 5 groups. All of the sutras fall into 5 groups, as you will see here on page 24 to 25. The first one, none of you have the book, so I'll explain. The first one is connected with verses, gathas. So they are all having gathas in them, verses in them. The second one is about nidana. Nidana here refers to the 12 nidanas, 12 links of dependent co-origination. And the other one is khanda, aggregates. They are all related to 5 aggregates in some way or the other. And that was the third. And the fourth one is salayatana. Salayatana means 6 senses. These sutras or discourses are connected to 6 senses, the way they are taught. And the last one is where we find the discourse that we are going to discuss today, which belongs to the Mahavagga, the collection of greater discourses. Let me see how he translated it. Um, well, should be here. Yeah, he translates this as great book, Mahavagga, because it's apparently bigger than the other four groups that we just discussed. And each of these five groups also are classified to different themes like ignorance, dwelling, wrongness, practice, wanderers of other sects, these little groups. And if you have the book, this is published in year 2000. This comes sometimes as a big book like this, or as in 3 volumes. So just make sure that you are buying the whole thing when you buy the book, and it's also available as an e-book. So you will find it rather easy to find search words and locate places. And this originally had, according to the commentaries, about 7,790 to some, that many sutras. But the editor of this book, Bhikkhu Bodhi, in the current stage, says that this has only some 2,000 sutras. And that says that some of the discourses are lost during the course of transmission, then through oral tradition or in written form, or somehow the other. Some are lost, and we have these in the collection. So this discourse, if you were here last time on Monday, as we discussed, when the Buddha became enlightened, he first thought that he's not going to teach, because he thought what he discovered was really difficult for people to understand. And when he was thinking this way, a great being called a Brahma, someone who is not living among us but a heavenly being, he showed up and said that there are people who have little dust in their eyes, and invited the Buddha to teach them. And then the Buddha, through his divine eye, searched through the world and found that there are beings who have little dust in their eyes, which means they have some wisdom that they can understand this teaching. So he then searched through his divine eye, to whom he would teach this for the first time, who will be the first listeners. Then he found 2 of his teachers previously helped him to come to this stage. But one of them died 7 days ago, as he found out, and the other one died the night before. Unfortunately, they were not available. So Alara Kalama died 7 days ago and 7 nights ago, and Uddakarama Putta, he died, Uddakarama's son, Putta means son, he died just a night before his enlightenment. And then he decided to teach this teaching to his 5 companions that he has been living with for almost 6 years, I believe, during the time the Buddha was going through extreme, what is the word, austerity. The word autistic came to my mind, which is sorry, austerity, and and these 5 abandoned the Buddha at some point, as the Buddha came to realize that extreme austerity didn't help him. He went to the extreme of it. So these five, when they saw that the Buddha was slowly starting to eat, they thought that not the Buddha to be at that point was going to enjoy luxurious life again. So they told him to go away. That's kind of literally how you can think about that incident. But the Buddha came back after his awakening to teach these five guys, because he knows these people so well, as they have been living with him for a long time, and they have helped him toward this path of awakening. He was, he passed many miles to get to them, and they were living in Isipattana, which literally translates as the place where sages land. Isipattana.
The place where
sages. Hermits land. Isi also means those who have psychic abilities, so they land from air in this place, which is a place still existent, although no sages land there at this time. It's your opportunity to land there and show to the world that this place can still be called Isipattana. And Migadaya, where deers live, deer's park. That's how it is translated. And it's a place in India, in the city named Benares now, or Varanasi. That is the place. Not too far from, not too close either, from the place where the Buddha became enlightened. Have you been to these places? So I did a tour of 8 days from Sri Lanka. It's very cheap to go there. I was already studying here, but I went to lead a retreat in Sri Lanka and had just 8 days to go on 8 days tour, starting from the place where the Buddha became. So you land in Bodh Gaya and you visit the place where the Buddha became enlightened. There is a Bodhi tree there, a sapling of the Bodhi tree, really huge, lot of people. And then you go to the place where he practiced extreme austerities. There is a cave inside which the Buddha is said to have meditated. There is a statue of him almost looking like a skeleton, his skin absorbed to the skeleton. It's kind of a statue. And so you go on with many different places. So the Buddha himself has said that any Buddhist should see the place of his birth and the place where he gave the first sermon, the place where he became enlightened, and the place where he passed away into great Parinibbana. So that last place is now in Nepal. So you have to cross the border to get there. And there's a long line sometimes, and on the day we went, there were some protests going on between the two armies of two countries, oil related, as it always happens in the world now. Anyway, so did I miss anything about this? By delivering this, this is more or less the Buddha saying his experience. And usually in the discourses, the Buddha says, remember this and cultivate accordingly. In this sutra, we don't find that kind of a saying, but still the eightfold path, noble eightfold path is given here to the 5 ascetics. And so the Buddha had only 5 people to listen to him in his first sermon. And then it multiplied, as his reputation went to different directions. At the end of the discourse, Kondanya, the ascetics are named Kondanya, Vappa, Baddiya, Mahanama and Asaji, these 5. And Kondanya, I think the most senior one among the 5, realized, just he attained the path, not the fruition, but he realized, oh yeah, this is the way. It occurred to him at the end of this discourse. So he became known as Anya Kondanya, the known, or the one who came to know the truths, the 4 truths that are discussed here. So for the Buddha to enlighten all the 5, he had to give a discourse on non-self characteristics. That is the second discourse, very popular, delivered by the Buddha, which I discussed before this one last week. So you are almost ready to be enlightened. Alright, enough talking. Let me take this out so the book will not fall. It's very interesting. We have a lot to discuss, we'll see. And the title of the sutra goes as, sutra means discourse, the teaching given by the Buddha or a monk, setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. That is the first time the Buddha is setting the wheel of Dhamma in motion. Dhammacakka. Dhamma means teachings. Cakka means wheel. Pavattana, setting in motion. So starting from that point until he passed away 45 years later, he was teaching along the same lines, and he didn't change any of what he taught here. We'll go there. Thus have I heard, this is Ananda, the attendant monk of the Buddha, saying, on one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana. There, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus, bhikkhus means monks, of the group of 5 thus. Monks, so he first says this, these 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. This is not a kind of homeless life you find here in the, in towns. This is abandoning your luxurious life at home purposely to cultivate your mind to attain some higher states, because there's a calling in you that is the kind of life you should choose. That's how you find monks in the world, like they have this calling. Although that's not always the case with the monks nowadays, that because of poverty, because of other conditions in poor countries, they choose to be ordained, and parents sometimes put their children who are really stubborn in the temple, so they get trained and come out as socially acceptable people like us. In my case, I hurt my father's feelings when I left. He didn't want me to leave. I was 16 when I left. And he never talked to me for 5 years, even after I visited him. But now he's a monk. Mission accomplished. Bhikkhus, monks, these 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. What 2? The pursuit of sensual happiness in sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings like the ordinary people, which is ignoble, unbeneficial, and so that is the first extreme of sensual pleasures. As a prince born to a royal family. Um, can we say subordinate kingdom? Does it make any sense? Yeah, so he was born to a subordinate kingdom, not like a emperor kind of a palace, but as a prince he had all the luxuries at home. 3 palaces built for 3 seasons, and a lot of women for him. And he married a beautiful princess, had a son, and on the day he had the son, he has been contemplating on leaving the palace, and he thought if he were to kind of cuddle with his son, he would kind of abandon the feeling of going for higher purpose. So he just looked at the sun and left that night. He knew that he was bound to stay otherwise, because he had to make up his mind. It was hard as a father to leave his son, and that's also a complaint that the Bodhisattva has all his life. Like, how come a father leave on the day his son is born? So you have to make you know this, to make your mind. It's really hard. He did that for the sake of all beings, because he had this calling in his mind for ever since he was born, ever since he was seeing things that other people were not aware of. So he left. And he left having enjoyed all the pleasures he was given. 3 palaces for 3 seasons, kind of pleasures. And that father wanted him to be the universal monarch. So the father didn't want his son, only son, well, one of the 2 sons, because he married again and he had another son. And so this is his first son, and he gave the best kind of, you'll say Harvard, Oxford, Princeton kind of, Stanford kind of education, whatever the best place you want to name. And he wanted the best for, because he removed all this, signs that showcase any miseries, any miserable thing around the palace. No old person was allowed to dwell in the area. No dead bodies, no sick person was allowed. So this father was obsessed with the feeling that his son was going to be a universal monarch, which I think upset the prince. As a wise person, he knew that his father was on a different mission and he was on a completely different mission. So that was also part of the reasons. Like, if you are, I think, born like that, given such pressures in your life to go toward a goal that you didn't aspire to, I think you will yourself also be displeased with that kind of life. You need to enjoy your life out there in the world, right? It's a natural reaction you get. So in a way, his father contributed towards the leaving of the palace. So that's one extreme. And the other one, he had to deliberately practice. He was not born into it, which is the pursuit of self-mortification. And he then says, he doesn't use these words for the first one, he uses these words for the second one, which is self-mortification practice is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. Just 3 words. For the first one, he said sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial. That's how. So there are more words to discourage that part. Then he says the middle part, without how to say this? Fearing, P-E-E-R-I-N-G, veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has awakened to the Tathagata is another word for the Buddha, which literally translates as the thus gone one, has awakened to the middle way, middle part, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment. Nibbana. Nibbana is the Pali term for enlightenment. Sambodhaya is translated as to be enlightened, to enlighten, and Nibbana has not translated here. has not been translated. Nibbana is just left as it is, like free from bonding is the literal translation of it. So then the Buddha says, what bhikkhus, what monks is the middle way awakened to by the Buddha, which gives rise to vision, etc., leads to Nibbana? It is this noble eightfold path. So there are 8 limbs, 8 factors in this path. The first one is right view. The discourse will explain what these are. And the second one is right intention, right speech, the third one, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Some monks translate this term right as harmonious. It's always difficult to get the exact meaning of these terms, like Samma Sambuddha is rightly awakened one, and Samma Ditti is right view. So Samma is the term that they are trying to translate, like perfectly is another translation of it. This is the middle way awakened by the Buddha, which gives rise to vision. So he knew that it's only through these ways that one has to intentionally choose this kind of a life to get to the goal that he attained. So this is him saying, like, if you want to get to where I am, you have to do this. Don't go to that extreme, don't go to this extreme, just do this. And he says that until he realized this in a certain way, which we'll come to discuss here, he didn't admit that he was the Buddha. He wasn't willing to. He wanted to completely understand, realize what he was looking for, and when he came to the end of it, then only he claimed that, okay, this is it. There's nothing more left to be done. So I can now say that this is a kind of a person who should claim as the Buddha. So let's continue. Then he explained the eightfold path, the middle path. So he then goes on to explain the Four Noble Truths. Monks, this is the noble truth of suffering. This is what a truth. So he thought to himself, wow, this is such a truth. Nobody ever should say that life is suffering, and we don't find it here. That's the wrong translation of what he taught. There is suffering out there in life and other places. So that also implies that there is pleasure, happiness in life, and like yesterday I was giving a talk here, and a couple, I mentioned about a couple that came to see the Buddha who lived perfectly harmoniously, and they wanted to be born again and marry again. Once they died, they wanted to meet again. The Buddha didn't discourage them. He said, oh, don't be born again, that's suffering. He didn't say that. He said, yeah, you can be born again and live as a couple, and you should have these qualities like same faith, same kind of level of generosity, and same kind of wisdom, and same character. If you have those kind of perfectly matching, you are destined to meet again. So he didn't discourage them. So it's suffering has to be understood that way, that there shouldn't be any negativity about it. This is just a truth that the Buddha is telling to the world. So what is suffering? Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Illness, death, union with what is displeasing, usually having to live with someone you don't like. Yes, that is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering, right? Not being able to live with what you really want to live with is suffering. and not getting what you want. It's ever existence of you. You want things but you don't get it. So that is suffering. And in brief, the Buddha says 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. 5 aggregates. Do you know what those are?
No.
Form, just, what constitutes a form is your elements, like earth element, fire element, wind, air element, and water element, and the form is created that way. And that is again means your physical form, the body. This is when you have clinging to it. The body itself is not a problem. When you cling to what this body brings to you, then there is suffering that follows that kind of a mentality. When you are in peace, there is no way that suffering can follow you. So it's completely optional. That's why they say pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So form is the first aggregate. And the second one is feelings. There is an aggregate of feelings. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant feelings. And then the other one is perceptions. Saṃyutta, perceptions, different kind of perceptions like red, blue, green kind of perceptions. Always there is something that you become conscious on. When there is nothing around, the mind is skilled to catch something to perceive. It perceives neither perception nor non-perception as a perception sometimes. So that kind of danger is there when you cling to it. And formations is another aggregate. Usually mental formations, things that your mind forms, that when you cling to those, to proliferations. That's what the mind does. Like you think and then you make a story out of it, and you believe it. So sometimes these are not true, but it's too late when you discover this, right? So you cling to this when you believe it. You make a story about your husband or your wife. You made it, you believe it, and you create so much suffering to yourself and to her just by believing this illusory world. Just to give an example. This is even deeper than that. Sometimes your mind create things and you dwell in them forever. That's what the mind does. This mind is able to dream and dwell in there. These are just lucid explanations about 5 aggregates, and the last aggregate is the aggregate of consciousness. So you have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and when your eye is conscious on something, the other five basically are turned off, and then when there is a sound coming, you become conscious on it. The others are not active, but they constantly work somehow to keep you engaged. So that's an aggregate, and when you cling to those, that clinging is the problem. So that's something basically the Buddha taught in his first sermon. And then he says, so he saw the truth of suffering that way, birth to 5 clinging aggregates. And then he said, there is suffering and there is this origin of suffering. What is the origin? Is the craving that leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. So what kind of craving is that? Craving for sensual pleasures, craving to kind of exist somehow or the other, craving to exist in this world, or not to exist is again a craving. And and craving for sensual pleasures is the first, like kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. Tanha means craving. Kama tanha means craving for sensual pleasures. Bhava tanha is craving for being, craving to exist. Vibhava tanha means craving to not exist, which actually should be understood this way, that some teachers during the Buddha's time taught that humans will continue to be born for so many number of years and then they will perish. So that's kind of believing that kind of a annihilation or non-existence at a certain point. It's like they said, you go to a top of a mountain and you have a thread that's rolled around a stick like a ball, and then you roll it down and it ends somewhere. You hold the edge of it. So it goes and goes and goes and it ends somewhere. And that is when it ends. So likewise your life force will end. That's something that they try to explain at that point. So these kind of cravings were there for different people, including some teachers at the time. So Bhikkhu Bodhi translated these three as craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for extermination. Then the third truth, monks, this is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving. So you found found about craving, and its very cessation is the third truth. And this is not just cessation, remainderless cessation. There is no craving left in you when you awaken into this truth, fully awaken into it. So you relinquish it and you gain freedom from it, and there is non-reliance on it. That's how it's. So I will read it again. Monks, this is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. Okay? The fourth one, now this, monks, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So the way is the 8 factors we discussed earlier, the noble eightfold path, including the right view ending with right concentration. Those 8. And then the Buddha is making a declaration. He says, he goes to each of them and makes this declaration. This is the noble truth of suffering. Big monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. This is something. So light here is like he was in the darkness. Now there is light. He himself is the light. He was mired in darkness until he awakened into the truth. This noble truth of suffering is to be fully understood. Thus, big monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. So, and then he got, this noble truth of suffering has been fully understood. Thus, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. So you just heard 3 ways he looked at the first truth. The first way is just knowing that this is the truth of suffering. and it arose in him that he had never heard before. And then he realized, oh, this has to be fully understood. That's all you need to do about truth. No cultivation, just to understand, just to comprehend it. And the third knowledge is that it has been fully understood by him. There is no more left. Just to know the truth and know that it has to be fully understood, and realizing that it has been fully understood by him. So each truth goes in 3 cycles this way, and it becomes at the end 12. 12 ways of looking at the 4 truths, which has been a confusing thing for people, because when they look at the Pali terms, they hear the word Tiparivartan, 3 rounds. These are the 3 rounds, and Dvadasakara, in 12 ways, and 4 into 3 is 12, right? So that's how they become 12. So Dvadasakara. So he looked at each truth in these 12 ways. Then he goes to origin of suffering, and he says this is the origin of suffering, and it has to be abandoned. That is what he. So with that, craving has to be abandoned. That's the meaning of it. That's the second way of looking at it. So the first way of looking at the second truth is to know it, that this is the noble truth of origin of suffering. What is the origin of suffering? Craving is the origin of suffering. And then he came to realize that, oh, this has to be completely abandoned. And then the knowledge came that he abandoned it. That's the third way of looking at the second truth. Now we have how many? 6. So 6 more left to be explained. And then you are going to the cessation of suffering. So he it occurred to him that this is also a truth. This is that there is the cessation, there is a possibility that you can end suffering. So he discovered how to cease. Is that a proper way to say it? How to cease suffering? That's the first way to look at it. And then he realized this cessation is to be realized, and he then looked at it as it has been realized by him. He kind of is going analytically about each of these to be completely sure that he did what he had to do. And you now come to the 4th one, which has a slightly different wording. So he first says that this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So that's the first way to look at it. And then he says, Bhavetabam, this has to be developed, because it's a part. So there is something to be developed there. In the previous ones it was about realizing, but the path especially has to be developed. So then he realized, wow, this has to be developed, and if you don't develop this kind of a path, you are not going to reach to these things like vision arose, light arose kind of a place. And then he came to realize that what had to be developed has been developed by him. That's how you look at it. Look at each truth in these ways. Completely confident that he looked at each of these carefully. In these ways, he came to kind of claim himself that he is the awakened one, and no one has taught this way before, and he went to the best teachers at the time, He knew who were the best teachers, and he realized this is it. He followed all the best teachers. Now it is his duty to go alone because he was not happy. He practiced all what those teachers taught him, and they placed him in the position of teacher for their students, but that was not his goal. And he said, "No, thank you," and left. So this is what he then discovered. Then he says this interesting thing. So long, monks, so long as my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are in their 3 phases and 12 aspects was not thoroughly purified in this way, the way we just discussed, I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with its deities, the evil one, the great Brahma. The Brahma is the term for this great being who is a divine being. In this generation with its ascetics and all the Brahmins, humans, devas again means divine beings. But when my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are in their 3 phases and 12 aspects, so we have to go through each of these 4 truths in 3 phases, and as he went to each 3 phases, it altogether became 12 aspects. Was thoroughly purified in this way, then I claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed. No one can surpass this perfect enlightenment in this world with its all these people that I mentioned. This is what the Blessed One said. Elated the bhikkhus, the monks of the group of 5, delighted in the Blessed One's statement. And now you hear this other udana, joyful utterance. While this discourse was being spoken, there arose in Venerable Kondanya, the first of the 5 disciples, the dust-free, stainless vision of the truth, the Dhamma. The joyful utterance is, whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. That's what he realized. This is a deep statement. If a self-view has been originated, it's a conditioned thing, and that too is subject to cessation. And so these, it may not exactly what I just said that he was awakened into. So the Pali term is yantam samudaya dhammam sabbantam nirodha dhammam. Whatever is subject to origination is subject to cessation. So he, I think, could not find anything that is not subject to cessation, that is permanent. That's a different way to look at it. That's all he came to understand. Let's go for a couple of more minutes to end it. Now what we hear is, because this is the first time this kind of a teaching is taught in the eon of this Buddha's time, so many Ryans out there were delighted. So let's go into that part. And when the wheel of the teaching, wheel of the truth, wheel of the Dhamma had been set in motion by the Blessed One, the earth-dwelling deities raised a cry. What kind of a cry? This is their cry. At Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatana, this unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or by anyone in the world. And then somebody else heard this. Having heard the cry of the earth-dwelling Devas, the Devas of the realm of the four great kings raised a cry, the same cry. And then having heard that Tavatinsa Devas raised the cry, and it was heard by the Yama Devas. I'll go to the list in English in a different place. This doesn't have it. And Yama Devas raised a cry, and then Tusita Devas raised a cry, and Nimanurati Devas raised a cry, and Paranimita Vasuvati Devas. These are different realms where heavenly beings exist. And then the Devas of Brahma company raised a cry. It goes on and on to the top of the 31 planes of existence. At Varanasi, the wheel of Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin or Deva. So the message that this was realized and taught went to all the planes, and these beings are still in existence because their lifespan is very long. Unlike ours, we live maximum 80 to 100 to 120 kind of years, but in their time it's just like a 1 second or 1 millisecond. It's something unfathomable. Thus, at that moment, at that instant, at that second, the cry spread as far as the Brahma world, and this 10,000-fold world system shook, quaked, and trembled, and an immeasurable, glorious radiance appeared in the world, surpassing the divine majesty of the divine beings. Then the Blessed One uttered this inspired, this is the inspired utterance, not that one, sorry. Not whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. That occurred in Kondanya's mind, not in the Buddha's, but the Buddha says this. Then the Blessed One uttered this inspired utterance, or Udana. This is the utterance. Kondanya has indeed understood. Kondanya has indeed understood. In this way, the Venerable Kondanya acquired the name Anya Kondanya. If you are the first one to understand this, he will put your name and say Anya Mary or Anya Steve or something. So this is like just the one who has understood. Kondanya who has understood. That's the meaning of Anya Kondanya. So, yeah, 8:30. Let me go to the 31 planes of existence. If you have many, but feel free to go to whatever the plane of existence you want to go to. So, there's a list in access to. When you go home, if you're curious, there's a website called Access to Insight, organized by Venerable Thanissaro, and he has the list here so it goes from number 1 in the bottom, because the bottom one is Hell Realm, which is not where we are, but sometimes you want to go there in your mind. So this is the Hell Realm is unimaginable. So they have unimaginable suffering and anguish, and these are discussed in Majjhima Nikāya, the middle length discourses, not connected discourses, in 129 and 130. And there is a note here says it should not be confused with the eternal hell found in other religious traditions, since one's time here is, as it is in every realm, temporary. Because in hell realm, according to Buddhist doctrine, is not permanently existing place, and when you recall something good you have done, you instantly reappear in a better place, better realm. So why you go into these places is because you do 10 unwholesome actions like killing, lying, and all kinds of 10 things. Lack of virtue, holding to wrong views, and murdering your parents, murdering an arahant, which means an awakened person, injuring Buddha, or creating a schism, like when monks are in harmony, you somehow say things to divide monks, and that is a grave of things. And also being quarrelsome and annoying to others. Just trying to help. And there is little above that is Tirachana Yoni, animal realm. This realm includes all the non-human forms of life that are visible to us under ordinary circumstances, like animals, insects, fish, birds, worms, etc. And you are born in those places. Not actually some of the dogs in these countries, right? They have such extreme luxuries. But they seem to have gone there because of 10 unwholesome actions, lack of virtue, holding to wrong views. But you see that they have such greediness sometimes, right? give me food kind of greediness. And they have real bondedness with their owner. They are not free from it. Even after death, I think they are said to have hang around, not really, as ghosts, but at least temporarily they get confused where they are because they lack wisdom. They haven't heard teachings like us. And then little bit above them is hungry ghosts, which in Pali Buddhist terms is Petaloka. Ghosts and unhappy spirits wander hopelessly about this realm, searching in vain for sensual fulfillment. And you go there because of 10 unwholesome actions, lack of virtue, holding to wrong views again. And I have heard this thing about some monks who have strong psychic abilities. When they go to places where there has been a battle, and they have seen some soldiers who at that point when the battle was in operation, they were trying to claim a wall or something, but they died in accomplishing that goal, so they are still in their mind are trying to catch that wall. That's the inclination of their mind. They are still hanging in that goal. This is why when you die with certain goal and unfulfilled, in mind you are still trying to fulfill it. You have created that illusory world to yourself, and when you are not mindful enough, like in a battlefield, you are not able to see what is happening to you. This is why the teachings here says that you have to be mindful of your last thought. When you have done meditation, you are able to purify your mind, and you mindfully and happily recall many good things you have done in your life, helping others, and you are joyful when you recall this because there is nothing else. No wealth you own can give you the pleasure, but donating to Great Lakes Buddhist Vihara or things like that. When you recall those, you gain such pleasure and you will be born in happy realm. You want to protect this Vihara. Oh, I heard such good teachings from the monks there. What a joyful thing to recall. Anyway, and then above that is human beings, us, and rebirth as a human being is extraordinarily rare. It is also extraordinarily precious as its unique balance of pleasure and pain, the Buddha says. It facilitates the development of virtue and wisdom to the degree necessary to set one free from the entire cycle of births. this is a place because if you are born in heavenly pleasure, there's only pleasure. You want to enjoy as much as you can, and only when your merits end, you realize, my goodness, I haven't made use of my time there, but you're already born in a lower realm by the time you come to realize that. So that happens. So you go there by developing virtues and wisdom. You come here. So you have been a virtuous person. That is why you are born in United States of America or Sri Lanka or anywhere as a human being. Sometimes people don't make use of that opportunity. They want to continue, they want to do bad things and continue doing those things. And they create so much suffering to themselves that way and to others as well. So you can, or you are also, you can be born in human realm when you have attained a stream entry. Stream here says, going against the stream of suffering. And so when you enter, wow, you realize, wow, this is the truth, and I have awakened into it, and I now know the path. And so you come back to human realm to finish this course, if you didn't have time in your previous birth. Let me go through this really quickly. I'm not sure how much time you have. I know you have things to do. And you know I have things to do. I'm translating a book, and these days I had to send it to the publisher by Friday. And there's a lot to be done. I need that chair. So above that is the Devas of 4 great kings, the home of the celestial musicians, and home of powerful demons, 3 spirits of varying degrees of ethical purity, and the latter are analogous to the goblins, trolls, and fairies of Western fairy tales. Then above that is the 33 gods, Tavatimsadeva, including Sakka, the leader of them. He is a devotee of the Buddha, presides over the 31 realms. Many devas dwelling here live in mansions in the air. And Yama Deva. Yama Devas, these devas live in the air free of difficulties. Please try to be born there. The above category is contented devas, Tusita devas, realm of pure delight and gaiety. I don't know the meaning of that. Joy, yes, thank you. Bodhisattvas, which means people who are to become Buddhas, abide here prior to their final human birth. This is where they go. And the future Buddha is dwelling there right now. Bow to him. This is where the Maitreya, that's the name of the future Buddha. The next Buddha is said to dwell. And the next realm is Devas delighting in creation, Nimmanrati Deva. These Devas delight in the sense objects of their own creation. And quite opposite to that, the above category, Devas wielding power over the creation of others, Paranimitta Vasavati Devas dwell, and these Devas enjoy sense pleasures created by others for them. And especially the evil one, the Mara, the personification of delusion and desire, lives here. So from human birth to being born in those beings who live wielding power over the creation of others, and the course to be born in these phases is 10 wholesome actions, generosity, the development of virtue and wisdom. And then above that, number 12 is retinue of Brahma, beings in these planes, and ministers of Brahma. Beings in these planes, so those 12 and 13, they enjoy varying degrees of jhana bliss. Jhana is a term for absorption. That there are four of those absorptions. Briefly, that's all I can say. If you were here yesterday, you think we discussed that in Sinhala, not in English, so you wouldn't have understood unless you spoke Sinhala. So, and those who have cultivated the first jhana can be born in these Brahma realms. And great Brahmas, and those who have, again, if you have cultivated that to the first jhana to highest degree, not the medium degree, you will be born in that great Brahma's realm. One of these realms' most famous inhabitants is the great Brahma, a deity whose delusion leads him to regard himself as the all-powerful, all-seeing creator of the universe. There is a being like that. And then number 15, devas of limited radiance, Parittaba Deva. You go there from minor degree of second jhana, and devas of unbounded radiance, Appamanabha Deva. Second jhana is medium degree. When you have practiced that to medium degree, you are born there. Number 17, devas of streaming radiance, Abhasara Deva. And number 18, devas of limited glory, Paritta Subha Deva. Number 19, devas of unbounded glory, Appamana Subha Deva. And devas of refulgent, is that the right way to say it? Refulgent or refulgent? Refulgent glory, Subhakin, I think some finest kind of glory, Subhakina Deva. Number 21, very fruitful devas, Vehaphala devas. And beings in these planes enjoy varying degrees of jhanic bliss, like third jhana to highest degree, third jhana to medium degree, third jhana to minor degree, the second jhana to highest degree, like that. And then number 22, there is a category of beings called unconscious beings, Asanya Satta. So only bodies present, no mind. Don't ask me any questions about that. I'm not there. Devas not falling away, Aviha Deva. Number 24, untroubled devas, Atapa Deva. Number 25, beautiful devas, Sudasa. Clear-sighted devas, Sudasi Deva. Fearless devas, Akanita devas, they don't have any seniors. Among its inhabitants is Brahma Sahampati, who begs the Buddha to teach the Dhamma to the world. These are the 5 pure abodes, Suddhavasa pure abodes, which are accessible only to non-returners, Anagamis. So when you are a non-returner, you are not returning to human or any sensual worlds, because you have done being there. Beings who become non-returners in other planes are reborn here, where they attain arahantship. So you don't come back, you end there. You don't have any delight in these places. You have enjoyed it enough. That doesn't say that that's how you end it. It's just you cultivate the wisdom to realize that no matter how many times I enjoy these things, this is it. There's no ending of it. So you go there cultivating the 4th jhana to the fullest. And now we have 28 to 31. Infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception. And the inhabitants of these realms are possessed entirely of mind, having no physical body. They are unable to hear Dhamma teachings. Now you have the answer why the Buddha could not teach his first 2 teachers who have attained to these places. The infinite space and infinite nothingness and neither perception nor non-perception. So they were there, so the Buddha, they were not in a place that the Buddha could reach. And so you are born in those places because of first formless jhana, second formless jhana, which are these infinite space, infinite consciousness, and third formless jhana, nothingness, and last, 4th formless jhana. So that is the 31 realms. Which one are you in right now? You're still here in the human realm. Welcome back. So let's end the discussion there. I'm sorry. Please bring your questions to the next discussion. which one do you want to discuss in the next discussion? Can you suggest anything? Maybe we should have kept this for the next discussion. But it's nice, we went through all of these, so who knows, right? Which preamble will be in by next week. I will think of something and maybe I will surprise you with something next week. So let's go to page 6 and just chant the Gatha in English at the end, the closing one. The avoiding of evil, doing of good, the purification of the mind, this is the Buddha's teaching. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. That's the meaning of it. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for listening and not asking questions. She said that because the Buddha says those who ask questions will be born wise.